Welcome back to the show where we run you through all the Dolphins news you need to know about. If you guys hear anything in the background, I apologize. The dogs are around, they're over here milling around like a bunch of crazy dogs. But on today's show, we're going to be running you through the news you need to know about, and after that, we run you through the fan Q&A where we answer fans' questions. Hopefully the background noise won't be too annoying. On today's show, it's going to be very short. We're just going to be doing news and fan Q&A. Usually we do the free agency breakdown, but we've already done every single position. So if you like that kind of stuff, if you like the previous podcast, make sure you guys go check out every single one that we did, or I did. I shouldn't say we. Yeah, it's pretty exciting. We actually broke every single position down. Got me all hyped up. We're gonna have tons more to talk about next week. But again, this is going to be a shorter episode because there's literally no news. And I think we've actually done this first news story before. I think we did. Let's see here. See which one I want to do first. We'll do. Okay, we'll do this as a quick one. If you guys don't know, the Dolphins are eyeing former Patriots free agents that will be hitting the open market. That list includes Devin McCourty, Kyle Van Noy, Joe Thuney, Logan Ryan. Obviously, he's been a Titan for the last few years, but he was a former Patriot. Those guys are very high, reportedly from Pro Football Rumors, on the Miami Dolphins free agent list. So that's one news story that I think we've already really talked about on today's show or previous shows, and really just to break it down quickly for you guys because it is an interesting topic. Joe Thuney, Logan Ryan, Kyle Van Noy, and Devin McCourty. I think the least guy I would want on that list is probably Devin McCourty. Joe Thuney, he feels probably the biggest need, which is really reinforcing the line of scrimmage, which is desperately needed, especially on this team. I mean, guard has been an issue for a long time. And this is someone who doesn't get injured. He's never gotten injured. He plays a ton of snaps, and I think that's probably the most valuable out of all the offensive linemen. And I've thought about this before. We broke down the offensive linemen on last week's episode, but thinking about it more, I think Joe Thuney is probably number one on my list. He might not be the most. He might not be the most talented on the list, but he's the most consistent. He's always on the field, and he's very talented. And for those reasons, I think he should be number one. Conklin, he's a talented player, but he's had a very bad injury history, and he plays tackle. And he's never been able to really stay healthy. So if you look at his career, but Joe Thuney he's there week in week out, and he's a very talented player. So when you look at the people on this list, Joe Thuney, Kyle Van Noy, I think those are probably my top two. Logan Ryan would be a close three, but Kyle Van Noy is a playmaker. He's a great player. I think Logan Ryan is a very underrated player when you look at his career. I mean, the season that he had this past season, he had a ridiculous amount of tackles. I can't remember how many, but when you look at it, you think, does he play middle linebacker? I mean, it's an insane amount. It's an insane amount of tackles. He makes tackles in the open field. He's a playmaker in the secondary. He's a good cover, man-to-man cover corner. He's always been that. He's obviously familiar with the system, and him playing opposite X would be pretty special. You can move Nick Needham probably to nickel if you really wanted to, and I would love to get Bobby out of the safety position, but we'll really I would love to get a young safety at that position. So I don't know. Devin McCourty would be nice to replace Bobby there, and we really, to be honest with you, the safeties are interesting because I think we really didn't talk about that position enough. But that's another position I could see being addressed as well. One thing before we move on from this story, it's regarding free agency, and it's just really a gut feeling that I have. I have a feeling now. I know this for a fact that the New England and the Dolphins, well, they come from New England. When you hear interviews and watch interviews and things that relate to that team and how they were able to build some of those championship teams, the thing, especially recently, in their recent Super Bowl runs in the 2010s, they focused on secondary first. And they really wanted to accumulate as much depth and talent they could at that position. It's going to be interesting to see how the Dolphins prioritize things because they have said in the past that, Chris Greer said it last year, I really want to focus on the trenches. Is that something that, I don't know. I have a feeling that you could see a little bit more secondary reinforcements than you would have guessed before. I just have a feeling about that. So we'll see what happens. But I have a feeling more secondary members will become new members will be coming to the team than people might think. Because, like I said, if you look at the past and where they come from and some of the philosophies they come from, secondary is probably the most important to those. And if you look at what the Lions are doing, they've signed some big defensive linemen in terms of big names, but I feel like they build it back end to the front, really, if you think about it. And I don't know. It's just gonna be interesting to see how the Dolphins handle things. They have said that the line of scrimmage is it needs so much talent that I think I don't know. I'm kind of getting tongue twisted here. I think you're gonna see more secondary help than you might have anticipated, in my opinion, just because of some of the past things that those regimes have done. All right, let's see here. What else news do we have? That was literally pretty much it, guys. And I'm not even joking. We're about 5 minutes into this video, and I was looking everywhere for news. We got 2 news stories left. This one is just kind of a history lesson in terms of what some of the, in the early or late 90s, wasn't it? Or early 2000s. Well, was it mid 90s? Really, when Jimmy Johnson put together, and we had a ton of draft picks over those years and what Jimmy Johnson was able to do. So here's a little information on that. Miami made 36 selections over a 3-year period from 1996 to 1998. Like any draft class, a portion of those picks were solid contributors, and some did not work out. But with so many bites at the apple, the Dolphins were able to establish an identity and produce a core that led to 7 consecutive winning seasons and 5 playoff berths. Jason Taylor was a first-ballot Hall of Famer. Zach Thomas made the finalist of the Hall of Fame this past season, while cornerbacks Patrick Surtain and Sam Madison combined for 7 Pro Bowls and 3 first-team All-Pro selections in Miami. So basically what this is saying is that was the last time the Dolphins had that or close to that amount of draft capital, and that's what they were able to do with it. And again, granted, we had a lot of, Jimmy Johnson was there, and he had done that in Dallas before, really building a winner through the draft. The one thing that team didn't have, or wasn't able to sustain long enough with, was a great quarterback. Dan was there into his later years. But and after Dan left was the 99 season to the 2000 season. After that, it was pretty much, and we had those players for a solid amount of time after Dan. So in terms of some of the core players like Zach and Jason, and there's some players that they left off the list too that were really good players as well. So unfortunately, that team just didn't wasn't able to ride a prime quarterback for their entire career. It would have been interesting to see what that defense could have done with a quarterback in his prime. For 10 years. It would have been interesting. Because that defense was loaded. Same thing with the 2011 team. 2011 team was really talented and just didn't have a good quarterback. Alright, so let's see here. This next news story is a mock draft that I wanted to talk about. This comes from NFL.com, and this is Daniel Jeremiah's mock draft. I figured we would go through this really quick. He has us selecting Tua Tagovailoa at 5. And this is where it gets really interesting. At 18, he has us selecting Henry Ruggs III. And the last pick of the first round for the Dolphins was Austin Jackson, offensive tackle out of USC. So just an interesting first round. It's all offense in that first round. I would have rather us, and I know we need an offensive lineman, but hopefully we can address some of that in free agency. But if you're getting to the later rounds of the draft, I would rather take someone who's a higher graded player there. Because I think Jonathan Taylor and Jonathan J.K. or Swift would be better selections than Austin Jackson, in my opinion. And they fill a huge hole. So I would rather, talking about this mock draft, I would have much rather taken a running back who has superstar potential at the end of the first round. Because there's a lot of them. I think all 3 of those players could be really good players. And Henry Ruggs is who I really want to talk about, the 18th pick of the draft. I've heard a lot of people talk about him on various different podcasts. Chris Simmons is, I think, the one that really stood out to me, what he said about Henry Ruggs, he was honestly knows a lot more about football than I do. And it's very interesting. He was talking about how he thinks he's not the athlete that Tyreek Hill is, but he's a more complete receiver than Tyreek Hill was coming out of college, which I think is an interesting comparison, pro comparison, because they're both athletic people, both deep threats, both can affect special teams, so they can affect the game in many different ways, not just being a receiver. They can catch jet sweeps, and end arounds, whatever you really want them to do. They can get involved in the running game. You can throw them screens, and they can make a yard catch turn into an 80-yard gain. They both have those things, but Henry Ruggs, according to people that know more than me, is more of a complete receiver, which I think is very interesting. To have that amount of athleticism and to be able to do many different things in an offense and affect the game in so many different ways, I think he would be worth the 18th pick. I'm a believer in now. Do the Dolphins need a receiver? No, they do not need a receiver. Keyword right there is need. Would this player improve the team? Yes. So I think that's where the most important aspect of this selection lies. Is it would make the team faster. It would make it more explosive, and it would make the team ultimately better for it. It would make the offense more versatile. I think it would be a very good selection for the Dolphins, especially if they were able to pair him up with Tua, and it really just would give this offense another dimension that they get from Jakeem Grant. But Jakeem Grant is not consistent enough at receiver. Whether it's his drops, his muffed punts, or his injuries, he just hasn't been a consistent player in Miami. He's a talented player, and he's gotten better every single year he's been in the league. But Henry Ruggs could be an option of maybe more of a polished receiver who's a better athlete, who could be a little bit more consistent for this team and be a crucial playmaker. I think this offense would be, especially the passing offense, it would be insane if we were to add someone of his skill level. So I'm all for it. If the Dolphins are sitting at 18, they're looking at their board and they're thinking, you know what, Henry Ruggs is the best player on the board. He's an explosive player, can add many different dimensions to the team, and make this offense really click. I think, I'm all for it. If you look at the roster, excuse me, voice crack. If you look at the roster with the team or with the receivers that are already there, you got Preston Williams. First of all, people need to go back and watch Preston Williams because I recently did that. Preston Williams is going to be a very good player. He's going to be a special player. He was dominating. Like the games that I think of note to watch him play is the home game against the Jets. He dominated that game. Like he absolutely dominated that game. There's a couple times where it even surprised me that I was like, dang, man, Preston Williams, he's going to be a very special player. So you have Preston Williams on the outside. Same thing with Devontae Parker. He can move inside or out. He proved that this past season. He's much improved, and he had obviously a career year. So you have your two 6-foot outside receivers who can get jump balls and make plays. You put Henry Ruggs on the inside, and maybe he's not he's not Wes Welker level slot receiver where he's just gonna work the middle of the field and be a technician, but he's gonna be explosive, stretch the field. Even if people forget Devontae Parker's a 4-3 guy. The Albert Wilson, if you keep Albert around, if you keep Jakeem Grant around, we would have one of the fastest offenses in the NFL. And if you draft, let's say you draft DeAndre Swift or J.K. Dobbins or Jonathan Taylor in the latter parts of the first round, our skill positions on offense would be some of the best in the NFL. We would have the best skill positions by far in our division. Our offense, in terms of skill positions, talent-wise, would be by far the best. And if you really secure the offensive line in free agency, that would be one of the deadliest offenses in the league. When you see the talent that's there and the many different things, especially with Devontae Parker and Preston Williams can take over a game. I mean, Preston Williams was an undrafted rookie, and he showed that he could do that. He did it against the Jets. Like, he took over that game. He made the biggest plays in that game on offense. Whether it was the pass interference, he had 2 touchdown catches in that game. He was just an absolute monster in that game. So, if you look at the division, what it would mean for the offense, it could be something special if you were to add Henry Ruggs to it. So, it's an interesting thing to think about. I just really wanted to bring that up because I haven't really seen any mock drafts with us taking him or taking a receiver at that spot. But for the reasons that I said and described, I think it would be an interesting, it's definitely different idea of way of building the team. I mean, it would be one of the most exciting offenses in the league to watch. That's for sure. If you add, even if Tua doesn't start with Ryan Fitzpatrick. And like I said, if you took care of the line in free agency, and you don't have to get all 5 superstars, because like I said, before, if you look at the offensive line that's here already, Michael Dieter has showed promise. He got better week to week. He got better. The offensive line got better together week to week. Really, that's you have one guard position filled. All the other positions do need to be addressed in some way, whether it's at depth or improvement at either one of those positions. But you don't have to get a $10 million guy there a year. You can get a solid player at those positions that fit your scheme, and I have confidence that the organization will do that, and you can do that through free agency. You can bolster it enough, sprinkle in a third, second, fourth round pick in there, and you've got a better offensive line than you did the year before. And then if you build the foundation with some of those skill players, that offense could be special. It could be very, very special. And it's really all you're adding is one receiver, a running back, which you can do because of the depth and the positioning you have in the draft, and the depth, like I said, the depth of that position in the draft. You have an opportunity to really make over that offense that's already a solid one. Remember, this team was a top 10 passing team when Ryan Fitzpatrick took over the job again for Josh Rosen in the Redskins game. It was top 10 in passing after that. That's a pretty impressive feat. So if you add to that and improve that to one of the strengths of the team, I think that could really ultimately result in something very special. Now, whether that's the right way to go, who the heck knows? But I think it's a very interesting take that I haven't really seen a lot of people really explore with this team, and I again, for fans would love it, because hey man, we're going up and down the field every single week. I think we would, people would, it would be, the things you could do with that offense would be crazy. You could stretch the field. You could go over the middle. You could do whatever the heck you want with that offense. There would be no limitations to the Dolphins offense if they added bolstered the offensive line, added Henry Ruggs. Either you take Jonathan Swift or J.K. the bottom of the first round, whoever you really like. I think all three of those guys are going to be good players. It could be very special, and it would be obviously it would be really fun to watch. I think that is all the Dolphins news you need to know about. If you want to, we can run quickly through some of these other mock drafts just to show you the difference. No one has ever had us taking Henry Ruggs, which I thought was an interesting. If you look at those three let's look at those 3 first-round picks before we move on. We'll just do this and we'll move on to the fan Q&A. We might run through another mock draft. I don't know, because this would be really, really, really a fast podcast. But let's talk about this for a second. Let's take position need. Just look at the player. Now Tua, I know, is a controversial. Some people don't like him in the Dolphins community, I guess. Okay, so you take Tua, right? And he's healthy. I know that's a big if. Let's just look at it this way. Tua, second, you get Henry Ruggs. Third, and a lot of people, 18 for Henry Ruggs he might be gone before then, to be honest with you. I could see him going in the top 15. Henry Ruggs, and then you go Jonathan Taylor, let's say. Or just pick your running back out of the 3. Look at those individual players as individuals. Those are all really, really special players that could be potential pro. All 3 of those guys could get to a Pro Bowl at one point in their career. So if that's your 3 first-round picks, I'm very okay with that. I like that. Those are 3 very talented players. Other than Tua, I have very little question marks about all 3 of those guys. And especially with Henry Ruggs, who's going to a situation where he's not the number 1 guy. If he went to Philly or somewhere where let's say this is like a Marquise Brown situation, where he's going to the Ravens, where it's like, dude, you're the best receiver on our team already. No, he's going to an offense that's already talented at that position. He's not going to have a ton of pressure on him. He can really just be himself and really just make the team better. He doesn't have to, reach for the stars, because there are people already in place there. So he wouldn't be the number 1 option, and he could just ball the heck out, which he would. I think he would, especially on our team. So, like in other mock drafts, a lot of them have Henry going to 23 to the Patriots or to the Eagles at 21. I'm looking at some of the other mock drafts that Henry is at. Some of them have him going in the top 15. I could see if the Dolphins didn't pick him, I could see either the Raiders or the Eagles. I think that's probably where he would end up. Like the Raiders at 19, not in the top 10. But I could see Henry going to the Raiders at 19, or I could see him going to the Eagles at 21. Definitely wouldn't want the Patriots to take him, that's for sure. But yeah, like I said, if you look at all 3 of those players individually, they're special players. Okay, so let's go through this mock draft and we'll move on to the fan Q&A. So this is a mock draft from NFL.com by Cynthia Freeland. Just to get, if you guys want to look at it yourselves. Chase Young in this mock draft goes 1, so this is a different one already. At 2, the Redskins take Isaiah Simmons. That would be pretty crazy. 3, Derek Brown to the Lions. 4, Tristan Wirfs, I think is how you say his name, tackle from Iowa. That goes to the Giants. Everybody has them taking him, by the way. Joe Burrow goes to the Miami Dolphins at 5. If somehow Joe didn't get picked 1 and he fell all the way to 5, that would be insane. There's no way that the Lions or Redskins don't get a call if that happens. And then they have the Panthers taking Jeff Okudah, and they have the Chargers taking Tua Tagovailoa. That would be a really sick first round if that were to happen. And I've said this before, I would not be surprised if the Bengals took Justin Herbert. And I don't know, I feel that in my balls that that's going to happen. I really do. For some reason, I feel like nobody thought Baker Mayfield would go number 1. I think the week before the draft, I think a lot of people were warming up to that, the idea of that happening. But nobody thought that we're the distance from now to the draft now. So anything's possible. But I don't know. I have a feeling that they would take someone like Justin Herbert. I'm not joking. And then they wouldn't apologize for it either. Let's see here. Okay, so let's go to I'm all over the place in this episode. All right, let's go to the Fan Q&A where we answer fans' questions. This is going to be a short episode. It's going to be a longer episode next week. For sure. All right, this first question comes from Dog. Dog says, who will be our new wide receivers coach? Who do you think is the most sign/re-sign player? Who do I think? I don't know who's going to be our next. Didn't we sign a replacement already? I'm not sure. It would have been awesome if Chad O'Shea came back to do that. That would be pretty awesome. I think, did Chad sign somewhere else? I'm not sure. So your other question is, who do you think is the most sign/re-sign player? I would say, who's the most likely sign player? Let's start with there. I would say the most likely is Joe Thuney. I think that's going to be a lock for sure. This next question comes from KID or Kid. It's all capitals, so I don't know how you say it. He says, "Hey Skaggs, fins up." I don't know if you say KID. I'm out of my mind. He says, "Hey Skaggs, fins up to you and the work you do, or the work you put into the show." Well, thank you. I really do appreciate that. He says, "What are your thoughts on this? We signed Melvin Gordon and possibly running back Matt Breida to go alongside him. I know it will come at a heavy price to the team, but it would set up our running back room." To be honest with you, when I saw Austin Eckler sign a $24 million deal, I think that was just in guaranteed money. That wouldn't hurt, especially our cap situation. That wouldn't hurt us at all. Plus, I think Melvin Gordon, especially how things ended up in LA last year, I think his prices went significantly tanked from where it was last year. I think, to be honest with you, Matt Breida would cost more than Melvin Gordon. That's not a joke. I really do believe that. This next question comes from Ethan. Ethan says, so I think, before we move on to Ethan, to really put a bow on that, on that thought, I think Melvin and Matt Breida would not be that much money. All right, let's move on to Ethan. Ethan says, hey Skaggs, what are your thoughts on several mock drafts now taking Henry Ruggs at 18? Since this is clearly not a position of need for us, could this be coming from actual rumors? I don't think it's actual rumors. I just think it's something different. And really, I've only seen one of a mock draft with us taking Henry Ruggs, and I think it's unique, and I think it's something different to think about, and it's interesting. I mean, it would be definitely fun to watch. I can tell you that right now. I don't think it's actually coming from any rumors. I think it's just just to do something different. But yeah, we talked about Henry Ruggs and how he would affect the team. But it's a good question. This next question comes from Danger Zone. He says, what if the Dolphins have to choose between Isaiah Simmons and Tua? You would take Tua Tagovailoa. Isaiah Simmons is my favorite player in the draft. If I had to pick, if you're like, who's your favorite player in the draft? I would say Isaiah Simmons if it wasn't a quarterback. If you involved the quarterbacks, I would say Joe Burrow. 2 is probably 2. And then I would say 3 is Isaiah Simmons. Isaiah Simmons was my favorite non-quarterback in this draft. I think he's going to be an absolute stud. Chase Young is going to be great too, but I love Isaiah Simmons. I mean, when's the last time we've seen a player listed at corner, linebacker, and safety? That's insane. The corner part's the craziest part. Like, I cannot believe, and he did. He played some corner in college. That's insane. Like, that to be that versatile is unheard of. This next question comes from Ethan. Ethan says, Daniel Jeremiah has us picking Justin Herbert while Okudah was still on the board. Please talk me off the ledge. This is pure fantasy, right? Love your show. Oh, so Okuda, do you mean at number 5? I think you said that actually. I don't know what position this was in. If this was in the 18th, which it wouldn't be, that would be crazy. But Justin Herbert over Jeff Okuda. I mean, we need a quarterback really bad. Justin Herbert has promise. I mean, I don't think it's as crazy as you might think. But yeah, Jeff is obviously a way better player. This next question comes from TR3. He says, Is Isaiah Simmons a good spot at number 5? Yeah, he would be a good spot at number 5, but I love Isaiah Simmons, don't get me wrong. But he doesn't play quarterback. This next question comes from Josh Hart. He says, Skaggs, should we draft a receiver in the first round? And if yes, who would you take? If I had to take a receiver in the first round... Okay, so let's say it's at 18. So that means Jerry Jeudy, and I'm assuming CeeDee Lamb are off the board. So that leaves me with Mims, Claypool, and Ruggs would be the best available. Unless I'm forgetting someone. Justin Jefferson's there too. I would probably take Ruggs. I like Ruggs a lot. To be honest with you, I like Justin Jefferson a lot too. I like Mims a lot too. I like all of those players, but when you talk about Claypool and Mims, they're the same as Devontae Parker and Preston Williams. They're big receivers. So they really wouldn't have a spot on our roster to really shine because we already have those players of that archetype. So I would go with Henry Ruggs because he brings something different to the team. If I had to pick one, I also like Henry Ruggs. This next question comes from Josh. He says, Skaggs, I think Kalen Ballage can be a decent physical downhill type running back. He just needs an O-line that can create the hole as soon as he gets the ball. Where running back would struggle behind that. What running back wouldn't struggle behind the line? Thoughts? This is why Kalen Ballage shouldn't be on the team anymore. Yes, the offensive line was terrible. Here's the reason why. This is the reason why Kalen Ballage was so disappointing. Number 1, when Marco Walton took over the job, he played significantly better. Number 2, when Patrick Laird took over the job, he played significantly better. Number 3, when Myles Gaskin took over the job, he played better. It wasn't significantly better, but it was better. All 3 of those players in front of him shouldn't play better than him. They dealt with the same offensive line, but they had better production. That's why Kalen Ballage isn't what we thought he would be. If he gets beat out by 2 undrafted rookies and a player who's, is basically an outcast. Mark Walton's talented, but he's not as talented as Kalen Ballage. None of those guys are. All of those guys are less talented than him, and they still beat him out and outperformed him. That's why he was so disappointing. And his play on the field was terrible. I mean, it was absolutely terrible. And like I said, all 3 of those players performed better, and they had the same personnel. So that's why he was so. And don't get me wrong, the talent level is there, but something has happened to him, man. This next question comes from Josh. He says, what moves do you expect the Dolphins to make when free agency starts? I think some of the locks, in my opinion, I think Joe Thuney will be a Dolphin. I think Marcus Golden has a high chance of being a Dolphin. And I think a secondary player, like maybe a Justin Simmons or Byron Jones, not at that level, but a high level, a big name from the secondary will be a Dolphin. I don't know who yet, but I expect that to happen. And I think those 3 things, for me, will happen. This next question comes from SM. SM says, which would be the ballsiest move? Staying put at 5 and hoping nobody jumps us for Tua, or taking the best player at 5 then trading up for Jordan Love? If both turn out into Pro Bowlers, which shows more balls? Staying put at 5. I would say staying put at 5. This next question comes from Take Me Out. He says, hey, Skaggs, I think our first pick is more likely to be a quarterback. Is the pick the Dolphins have to get right. Hypothetically, if the Dolphins choose to pass on Tua, thinking the injury risk is too large, how would you handle the quarterback situation, knowing you need to get someone, knowing that you need to get a franchise guy for the future? I'm taking Tua Tagovailoa, and I've said this a million times. I don't care about his injury history. I know people think it's stupid to dismiss it, but again, I've brought up and now it doesn't mean Tua's going to be these guys, but there have been other players that have had bad injury histories that have come out of college, and it's more than not, it's more those guys have succeeded than the other way around, that haven't had success. I mean, Deshaun Watson is the most recent one. That's, Adrian Peterson did it. There's a ton of players that had bad injury history in college that didn't have that issue in the NFL. Now, AP did miss a season, and so did Deshaun Watson. He missed a half a season. But after that, they were told. I mean, they had very productive careers. So, I mean, if you look, and Drew Brees is another one, obviously, who had the shoulder issues, but then never bothered him again for the rest of his career. The only one that I can think of in recent years that it completely ruined, injuries completely ruined his career, and his career could have been completely different. Maybe Percy Harvin comes to mind. I would say Chad Pennington's another one that comes to mind. I think if he didn't get, he had 2 rotator cuff surgeries in the same year, and that really and he said it himself. I mean, he just was never the same player after that. I think his is probably, to me, I think a very underrated one. He could have had a Hall of Fame career or close to it. Like, he could have had Carson Palmer's career, let's say that, if he didn't had the unfortunate injuries that he sustained. All right, guys, that's going to be it for this episode. We went through the fan Q&A. We went through all the news you need to know about. So that's going to be it, guys. I am Skags1083. I'm more excited for next week than anything. I cannot wait for the fan Q&A next week because it's going to be spicy. With all the moves that are going to be made. And even if the Dolphins don't make moves, I think there's going to be a lot to talk about. So I'm Skags1083, and I will see you guys in the next one.